Oh, the 80s and 90s. What a time it was to be alive. We had anything from Pogs, which actually originated in the 1920s in Hawaii, but made a huge comeback in the 1990s. We also had Game Boy Color, to Skip-Its, to terrifying Furbies that sometimes had a mind of their own. 90s nostalgia has been somewhat of a trend recently, with Tamagotchis making a comeback. I have one, and I am proud to announce that I kept it alive until it left planet Earth and went back to its home planet. Lisa Frank having collabs with brands such as Morphe, and we even had Rugrats Reptar bars hit the shelves at one point. Not to mention, just recently, Steve from Blue's Clues sent all of us a very uplifting message. However, what I didn't know was that among these brands, Lisa Frank was not all rainbows and unicorns as her brand perceived. There was a darker side. This is the rise and fall of Lisa Frank, the woman behind the bright rainbow colors, tigers, unicorns, seals, and more. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, hi, my name is Monica. I like to post anti-MLMs, that's anti-multi-level marketing, and some true crime content along with some, I guess you can say, anti-scam. I've been kind of sprinkling that in here and there over the last few weeks, but in today's video I am bringing you a deep dive into something I never thought I would be deep diving into, and that is the world of Lisa Frank. So, of course, just as a disclaimer, this video is for entertainment purposes only and just my opinions, along with it's just based on the research that I have been able to do. I encourage everyone to do their own research. I wanted to give a big thank you to Mitchie84 for becoming a channel member. Thank you so much for supporting my channel a little bit extra, and thank you so much to all of you guys who watch my videos here on YouTube and either support me, whether that be just by a view, a like, a dislike, or comments. It's all very greatly appreciated here. The idea for this video actually came from another video that I was watching by Bailey Sarian. If you guys don't know Bailey Sarian, she is a true crime content creator, and she now also has a podcast that's called Dark History, which I have been obsessed with. I love her new podcast. But I was listening in on I forget exactly which number it was, but it was a recent one. And she mentioned something about Lisa Frank not being the best company, I guess you can say. So I decided I wanted to look into it, and I wanted to see what Bailey was talking about because I had never heard of anything being wrong with Lisa Frank. Well, there's a lot to dive into. So with that being said, this is going to be a two-part series. Part one is going to be about the beginnings of Lisa Frank along with the slow demise of the company. In addition to that, we'll cover the working environment, while part two is going to be about the lawsuits along with collabs that Lisa Frank has done and some potential alleged scams. There's also another issue that I wanted to talk about, which was an influencer slash designer who felt as though she claimed that Lisa Frank had stolen an idea from her, and that was the reason why she was being evicted out of her apartment. So if you guys know of that story, then yes, I will be covering that, but that's going to be in part two. I remember when I was younger, Lisa Frank was all the rage. I only had a few things by Lisa Frank, but I knew of other girls in my school who had quite a number of things by Lisa Frank. It was almost as if you didn't have something by Lisa Frank, it was like an abomination. It was unheard of to not have something by Lisa Frank. So I do remember her as being the bright colors, and I'll always remember having this one folder. It was my favorite folder, and it was Lisa Frank with two whales on the front of the folder. It was my favorite, especially because I believe that was around the time that Free Willy came out, and Free Willy was one of my favorite movies as a kid. I have a lot of favorite movies, but Free Willy was one that I definitely had to rewind many times and rewatch it. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that my childhood has been ruined by learning more about the behind the scenes of Lisa Frank, which there is a really great article that was written by Jezebel, and I will leave that linked below, that I got a lot of my information from. But and like I said, I wouldn't say that my childhood was necessarily ruined, but knowing more and reading that article, and it was very disappointing to hear that this is what happened to Lisa Frank. If you are looking for a really, really great deep dive into the world of Lisa Frank, I highly recommend checking out this content creator by the name of Kalita Rosita. She did an amazing job covering Lisa Frank, going over everything super, super, super in depth. So if you're looking for something that you can sit there and binge for hours, I highly recommend watching that channel. I'll leave the channel along with the videos linked in the description box below. In order to understand where everything went wrong, we have to start from the very beginning. So let's get into the rise and the fall of Lisa Frank. Lisa Frank was born on April 21st, 1955. Lisa Frank is not just a person, but the name of her brand. She graduated Cranbrook Kingswood School in 1972, which was located in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, which is a city just north of Detroit. From what I've gathered, Bloomfield Hills is a wealthy area to live in with a population of under 10,000 people. Her father was an art collector and was the one who introduced her to the world of art. However, interestingly enough, he did work in the automotive industry and ran Detroit Aluminum and Brass. This was a publicly traded family company founded by Lisa's grandfather and his brothers in 1925. Detroit Aluminum and Brass manufactured automatic transmission components, clutches, etc. They were the only company in the U.S. to make engine bearings for tanks used during World War II. Detroit actually used to be called Motor City because it was once home to Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, otherwise known as the Big Three back in the day. Unfortunately, the success of Motor City would not last forever, and the decline of Detroit would inevitably happen. What I will say is that once Lisa developed an interest into art herself, her parents were supportive, which is not something that happens for everyone. Not to mention, her life was pretty comfortable due to her family being wealthy. Lisa told Urban Outfitters in an interview, quote, "My dad was an art collector. My mom had a little kiln in our basement and we would make pottery. I think from about age 5 on, they sent me to art classes and I was a huge colorer. Huge. I think to keep me quiet, they would bring the coloring books and crayons and I would fill up the books. I was totally a girly girl. I was not a jock. When I was 12, my parents got me a loom, so I was a weaver. I love to read, I love to do artwork, I love to do anything girly." End quote. It's clear that her parents not only supported her love for art, but they encouraged it as well. Maybe in the beginning it was to keep their child busy because we know children can be rambunctious, but it seems as though in her later years that may not have been the case anymore, and it was to encourage her abilities. Speaking of Lisa Frank's family wealth, she attended the same pre-K to grade 12 prep school as people such as Mitt and Anne Romney, along with Selma Blair. Her senior year, she entered into an art show and somehow made $3,000 by selling her art. Keep in mind, this was in the early 70s, and judging by a few inflation calculators I used, it seems like in today's world, that would be about $20,000 to $21,000. I'm very shocked by that amount. However, at the same time, if these calculators I used were correct, it would make sense due to one of the buyers being Lee Iacocca, who was the former president and CEO of Chrysler from the years 1978 to 1992. Fun fact, Lee participated in the design of the Ford Mustang and Pinto, amongst other cars, and it's been said that he convinced Henry Ford II to get back into racing. I'm not a fan of Ford, don't come for me, especially Mustangs, unless if we're talking about Eleanor from Gone in 60 Seconds, but I prefer Chevys because you can't beat that LS engine when it comes to American cars, but I am a huge fan of European cars. But regardless of my feelings towards Ford, it was the start of an era in the automotive industry. Thanks to that, Ford was able to claim wins at NASCAR and Le Mans in France, which going to Le Mans is a bucket list item for me. I'd choose that over NASCAR any day. Anyway, back to Lisa. She would go on to attend the University of Arizona. During her time there, she did something which I had no idea about. She would buy handmade pottery and jewelry from the local indigenous communities for a low price, then bring them back to Michigan and mark them up. Now, I understand that this is how it works with certain businesses where you purchase at a wholesale price and then mark it up to retail. However, in this situation, this isn't just any business. It's handmade items made by artists of the indigenous communities. Were they aware that Lisa was doing this, or was she taking advantage of them? If there was some kind of contract, that would be a little different. I can't help but question, even if there was a contract, was it fair, or were these indigenous people being taken advantage of? Because of this buying and selling at a marked up price, Lisa started doing very well for herself. So much so that she eventually started telling the artist what to make. I truly hope that these artists were properly, fairly, and ethically compensated, but I can't help but have a sneaking suspicion that they weren't. Once Lisa noticed that she had an entrepreneurial mindset, I guess is what we can call it, she started creating her own jewelry. This is where her plastic jewelry line, Sticky Fingers, was being sold at Neiman Marcus and Bloomingdale's. Lisa was just 20 at the time. I do wonder, though, if any of her success may have had to do with her family's wealth and large network. I'm not trying to say that she isn't talented or discredit the brand that she did build, but if she were just an average everyday person, would she have had the same opportunities? There are so many artists out there that I see on social media platforms, and I wonder when they're going to get their big break because they're just incredible. It's kind of how Rachel Hollis decided to go on TikTok that one time and say that she worked her ass off to get to where she was, but also failed to acknowledge that her ex-husband was a Disney executive, which could have helped her situation just a teensy tiny bit. Note my sarcasm there. Of course, Rachel did have her own success, but would she have become a household name prior to problematic behavior if she didn't have the same connections? In Lisa's first wholesale business, she was able to get the rights to Betty Boop, Popeye, and Mighty Mouse from King Features, so she would mix them up. For example, she would put Betty Boop on a unicorn. In 1979 is when she renamed her company to Lisa Frank Incorporated, and the Lisa Frank that would blow up in the 80s and 90s was born.
Frank makes the coolest stickers. I should know because I have most of them. There's all these folders and pens and backpacks and stationery and stickers. Of course, stickers. It's impossible to keep up with, but it's fun to try. Lisa Frank, you gotta have it.
The day I got stuck on Lisa Frank. The stickers were so cool. The colors were awesome. I gotta find more. So I go to the store. And wow, there's tons of awesome Lisa Frank stuff. I gotta have it. What more can I say? Pretty soon my friends Ashley and Lindsay are going Lisa Frank crazy too. So now we always get together and have the dreamiest sleepovers. The most outrageous parties. And we do the one and only club, Lisa Frank. Now life's a total blast. Lisa Frank, you gotta have it.
At just 25 years old, the same year she renamed the company, she landed her first $1 million order from Spencer Gifts. I don't know if Spencer still has the same popularity as it did when I was younger, probably not, but I remember going to the mall and always stopping in Spencer's. I was obsessed with covering all the walls in my room and posters and those glow-in-the-dark stars that you would stick on the ceiling, and Spencer's always had a bunch of those. Lisa Frank sold stickers, stationery, and other products that were brightly colored with unicorns, leopards, and other animals. When I was younger, if you didn't have Lisa Frank products, it was almost like an abomination. I didn't have too much Lisa Frank, but I knew of girls in school who literally had everything Lisa Frank. None of their Trapper Keepers, notebooks, folders, pencils, erasers, etc. were anything but Lisa Frank. What I will say, though, is if you go on the Lisa Frank website, they still have their original photos on there. I'm pretty sure one of the photos is Mila Kunis when she was really, really young. Even though Lisa had become a household name, she did like to stay somewhat private. There are only a handful of pictures and videos of her on the internet. She even asked Urban Outfitters in 2012 not to show her face when they filmed an interview with her. If you're wondering why Urban Outfitters filmed any kind of interview with her, it's because they did a collab with each other, which is something we will go over in part 2. Due to Lisa wanting to keep a low profile, in the same year 2012, in an interview with The Daily, she said, quote, "In my own little way, I understood Michael Jackson," end quote. I don't know how anyone can compare themselves to Michael Jackson, or at least their level of fame to Michael, but Lisa did. She even mentioned in the interview that when she goes out and people see her name on her credit card when she checks out, people immediately ask if she's the Lisa Frank, and she just shrugs it off as she happens to have the same name. I can respect her for wanting to keep herself and her life as private as possible, especially if your art is the focus of your brand, not you. There are some channels here on YouTube who never show their face, so you have no idea who's behind the voice you hear, and that's fine. But let's be real here, Michael Jackson was an entertainer. It would have been impossible for him to keep his life private. Yes, that's a form of art, but he's the king of pop, for crying out loud. I don't think she can equate her fame to that of Michael Jackson. I'm not sure if she meant it to be as extreme as it came out, or if she was just so full of herself when she said that. Maybe that was the first celebrity that popped into her mind during the interview, but I mean, she picked a hell of a celebrity to compare herself to. According to the Jezebel article that I'll be referencing a lot throughout this series, Lisa Frank was very focused on her appearance and always needed to be very thin. Judging by what some of her past employees were saying, it seems like she was, or maybe still is, a little more than just focused on her appearance. It sounds like she was obsessed with her appearance. I genuinely hope that this isn't due to any other struggles or issues she may be dealing with, and if she ever needed professional help, she would seek out to get it. Her employees even noticed it. One former employee said, quote, "Well, she's getting older now. She kept getting, I don't know if it was plastic surgery, but she kept getting these lotions talking about youth. Have you met her? She's like 2 pounds," she said, adding, "She just doesn't want to eat because she doesn't want to look fat or ugly or whatever she thinks," end quote. Let's move on to chat about Lisa's family. To give you a preface as to what kind of person Lisa's husband was, when former employees were interviewed by Jezebel and asked what the root of the problem was working at Lisa Frank, along with according to court documents, they all had the same answer. It was due to James Green, Lisa's husband and CEO of the company at one point. There were rumors that James was unfaithful to Lisa in addition to having a problem with cocaine. Court documents did say that the marriage between Lisa and James started off as just personal drama but turned into a professional disaster. Once we go over lawsuits associated with Lisa Frank and Lisa Frank Incorporated, this will become very, very apparent. James started his time at Lisa Frank in 1982 as the company's first in-house illustrator and designer. Sometime in late 1983, early 1984, James started to have a romantic relationship with Lisa. He also started to climb the corporate ladder, and in 1988, he became an officer and was named president and CEO in December of 1992. This is just my personal opinion, but I can't help but question if James had an ulterior motive from the very beginning. James and Lisa could have very well had a great relationship, and it could have happened on accident, but there could also be a possibility that James wanted to climb that corporate ladder. This was in the very beginnings of the Lisa Frank brand, but maybe he saw potential and something for his own gain. Again, this is just my thought process. Anyway, the two would marry on October 22nd, 1994. The following July, at the age of 41, Lisa gave birth to their first son. She would have 2 sons named Forrest and Hunter. Yes, that would make their names Forrest Green and Hunter Green. The 2 children were named after 2 characters of Lisa's, a leopard cub and a tiger cub. Once her children were born, she wasn't really interested in being a businesswoman anymore. I'm assuming she just wanted to spend time with her children because she started working from home and rarely made an appearance at the office. One of the employees who was interviewed stated that Lisa would come into the office maybe about once a month just to pop in and see how things were going. At this point in Lisa's career, and at the time her products had peaked, she decided to hand over her duties to James. Lisa had been the sole shareholder in her company, but when she decided to step down, she gave James 49% of the share holdings. For the next 10 years, James ran the company. According to a former employee by the name of Justin, he said that James, quote, really turned that place into a shit recently in a video, but I ended up cutting that bit out because it was associated with something else I was talking about, and unfortunately the original thing I said was slightly incorrect, and my personal story wouldn't have made sense without that part that I was incorrect on. One of you had commented on that video and was working on very limited information, but you did form your own opinion regarding that very limited information because I only told a small sliver of the story. I have made a whole entire video dedicated to that job, but it was an abusive and toxic work environment. The turnover rate there is the worst I've ever seen. Maybe even worse than the MLM companies I speak about on this channel. Reading about James and Lisa, it sounds like a very light version of my past employers, which is why from experience I can say an environment like that takes a toll on the employees. I'm not saying don't reprimand people when they do something wrong, because if someone does something wrong, they need to know so they don't do it again. but you don't need to publicly berate or verbally abuse them in the process. There's a difference between normal disciplinary action and flat-out abuse. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I wanted to talk about the work environment a little bit more and go over the problematic behavior displayed by James and Lisa. Caroline, who at one point wanted to apply to work for Lisa Frank Incorporated, said, quote, "Lisa Frank is notorious in Tucson as the world's shittiest employer. Every single person I talked to advised me to avoid Lisa Frank at all costs. I didn't know a single person who had not heard horror stories about the work environment there. I don't know if it's possible to really communicate how bad their reputation was in town. Every person who ever worked there seemed to have a case of PTSD from it. Rainbow Gulag is really an apt description," end quote. This was the general consensus of the town of Tucson and former employees. When you think of Lisa Frank, you think of a fun place to work with all of the colors, imagination, art, and sharing ideas with one another. However, for former employees, they stated that while they were at the office, it was to be silent and they were not allowed to speak to one another. Management even tapped into phone calls and illegally recorded them. There was a newsletter that would go out bi-monthly called Frankly Speaking, where employees were told how they were expected to behave within the company. There were new company policies coming out all the time, and with each policy, it just became more and more restrictive. If you violated any of the policies, you could endure verbal abuse, being publicly berated, automatic termination, or there could be even more policies and restrictions made that would be written about in Frankly Speaking. There was an incident that happened where an employee left 10 minutes early, and James was so angry about this that he told the warehouse manager to put chains and padlocks on all of the downstairs doors. Yes, you heard that right, chains and padlocks. As if the environment wasn't bad enough, James made it seem more like a prison rather than a workplace. Marcia, who was a graphic designer at one point, stated, quote, "There was just this air of fear there. It just seemed very clear, the mentality of it. Keep it ice cold. Keep people miserable and on edge. It was just insane. Totally insane," end quote. The environment wasn't just terrible at Lisa Frank Incorporated, but if you decided you wanted to leave, that was a completely different story. It's been alleged that if you decided to leave, you may not have been given the severance package you were promised. In addition, the company would fight unemployment benefits, and it got to the point where some former employees had to sue them to receive their final paychecks or commissions. Employees weren't the only ones who were dealing with this kind of nonsense. Local contractors and builders claimed that they hadn't been paid for $4 million worth of work on the Lisa Frank building in Tucson. Lisa Frank Incorporated was a revolving door. I know that I talked a lot about James's attitude towards the employees, which there's even more to get into about that, but Lisa was no angel. One person said, quote, "I personally heard Lisa scream at sales managers and threaten their lives if they fucked up a presentation," end quote. Another person said, quote, "Every day was so stressful, and hearing Lisa's voice downstairs on a speakerphone made my blood run cold. I had many instances where she abused me verbally," end quote. A former employee said that they had run into Lisa outside of work, and the person said, quote, "Oh, Lisa, remember me? I worked for you." And she said, "Oh, did we fire you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't really a great employer," end quote. Whether or not this particular conversation happened, I'm not sure. This is only being told from one side, and I haven't seen Lisa deny or confirm this conversation. If it did in fact happen and Lisa acknowledged that she was a terrible employer, then I'll give her some kind of props for that. It doesn't excuse or change anything that Lisa has done in the past, though. I know I've already gone over James a little bit, but he only gets worse in this story. Here are just a few things that former employees had to say about him. Quote, "James's management style is abrasive and he often leads by intimidation. He is often abusive to some of his employees by his language and actions. He will never take someone to the side if he has an issue with them. Instead, he will scream and curse and belittle them in front of everyone. Whenever he hasn't liked someone or they have crossed him in some way, he makes their work life miserable by his constant abusive comments and harassment," end quote. James wouldn't learn employees' names, so instead he would give them nicknames. Well, from the sounds of it, James was pulling a Michael Scott from The Office. I don't know if some of you remember the episode where Michael and Pam go to Holly's branch to give a presentation, and Michael starts giving people nicknames, and they're not exactly the nicest, and some are actually kind of offensive. Well, there was one woman who, according to a former employee at Lisa Frank Incorporated, was not the most attractive, and she was referred to as that guy by James. What a downright asshole. Some said he may have had the Napoleon complex. One person even said, quote, people who worked directly with James couldn't wear heels. He said it was because they couldn't walk fast enough to keep up with him. In reality, he had short man syndrome and didn't like working with women taller than him, end quote. And might I add that there are some women who can actually walk faster in heels than they can in regular shoes. I am actually one of them. I don't wear heels all that often because I am 5'9", so I'm very, very tall. But yeah, that whole explanation that James had is just a bunch of bullshit. Well, now we're going to introduce Rhonda Rowlett, who had been with Lisa Frank Incorporated since 1984 and became the company's vice president. It was said that James was a tool and Rhonda was his hammer, or as one former employee put, is she was a Darth Vader to James's emperor. Dan Mullen, who had been with the company for 14 years, said in court documents that Rhonda was the enforcer. James used her to maintain control of the employees. Apparently, employees were constantly being called to her office for her to only threaten and harass them. However, even Rhonda wasn't immune to James's abuse. The following is going to be pure speculation on the part of former employees because I have not seen concrete evidence of this, but it has been spoken about by numerous employees, so I thought it was at least worth mentioning in this video. With that said, take this with a grain of salt. A lot of former employees thought this behavior from James and even Rhonda was due to an addiction. The two of them allegedly were pretty big into coke, according to a former employee named Kyle. There was another former employee who said the following about a conversation they had with someone. Quote, she told me that James regularly sent her with an unmarked box or a paper bag to meet someone at a gas station or parking lot. She was supposed to exchange her package for theirs and not look inside. There was a lot of rumors and a couple of incidents about their cocaine use, so we can guess what was inside. He also had her buy his Viagra and his porn, end quote. Which, in my opinion, is pretty messed up if James had this employee going to pick up his substances, because what if she would have been stopped by an officer? Or what if she could have been arrested? She had no idea what was, she claims that she thinks she knew what was in the bags, but she was told not to look in the bag. So it's so messed up that if this is true, and if James really was telling one of his employees to go pick up his illegal substances, that's really messed up. Like, super messed up. Just bad. But anyway. Kyle said, quote, I think Lisa Frank was into a little bit of coke or something as well, end quote. This was due to some kind of letter that was on the back of one of the original artwork pieces in the archive room. It was from a friend of Lisa's where she talked about how much fun she had freebasing and whoring around New York with Lisa. One employee said, quote, I think we all Xeroxed that, end quote, which I haven't heard someone say Xeroxed that in such a long time. There were rumors going around saying that Rhonda and James were having an affair. I wouldn't doubt that, judging by what I've learned so far about James. Well, in July of 2005, James moved out of his and Lisa's family home, and come September of 2005, Lisa filed for divorce. During the summer of 2005, Lisa started to get more involved with the day-to-day at Lisa Frank Incorporated. In my opinion, I think she was trying to salvage whatever was left of the company. At the time, though, James was still CEO and Rhonda was still VP, so it turned messy really quickly. All of a sudden, James and Rhonda started telling the employees of Lisa Frank Incorporated that they needed to pick a side, James or Lisa. Let's just put it this way. It got ugly. There was spying on each other and employees via email monitoring, and it got to the point where a judge ordered James to return 6 computers that he stole from the company. These computers, apparently, according to him, contained some kind of personal correspondences, which is why he stole them. Lisa filed a civil suit and an application for a temporary restraining order against James. This was due to Lisa wanting to elect a new board of directors, and she wanted to keep James away from the business so he wouldn't harass employees and sabotage Lisa Frank Incorporated. Lisa became the CEO of Lisa Frank Incorporated again, while James, Rhonda, and Rhonda's secretary were escorted by the police out of the building. Lisa had only won this battle, and she would have to prepare for the war that was ahead, which we will go more in depth in part 2. Spoiler, there were a lot of back and forth and a lot of lawsuits. In the late 90s, Lisa Frank had truly hit its peak. They had made over $60 million a year in sales. According to court documents, the shareholder distributions between Lisa and James totaled over $100 million between 1995 and 2005. However, by 2013, the company earned $2.3 million in annual revenue, which is a lot to the average person, but can you imagine that kind of drop as a business owner within less than a decade? Their retail stores also started to tank. At one point, Lisa Frank Incorporated had 350 employees, and by 2013, it was said that they were at just 6. Since then, the Lisa Frank manufacturing plant has been abandoned. This building is 320,000 square feet and was known for all of the Lisa Frank decor and statues. It's pretty much what you would have expected Lisa Frank headquarters to look like. At the time of filming this, according to Dun & Bradstreet, Lisa Frank Incorporated has a total of 20 employees across all of its locations and generates $5.71 million in sales. However, their LinkedIn shows that they have 33 employees that are on LinkedIn, but that can also be inaccurate if someone doesn't use LinkedIn or they haven't updated it and they're still showing that they're working at Lisa Frank when they're really not. From my research, it seems like Lisa Frank doesn't manufacture her own products anymore, but she contracts someone else to do it for her. Former employees said that Lisa Frank could have easily capitalized off of 90s nostalgia. I mean, so many companies have done that. Like I said, just recently, Steve from Blue's Clues addressed all of us for the 25th anniversary of Blue's Clues, and the Empire State Building even lit up blue for the occasion. While Lisa Frank did have some collabs, which we will go over in part 2, it wasn't enough to truly save her brand. According to Jacob, a former illustrator for Lisa Frank Incorporated, quote, "They could have caught on with the hipster market, but in order for a company to really turn a corner in those kinds of things, they need compassionate leadership and people who appreciate and can nurture talent. They didn't have either of those," end quote. Jacob was referring to Lisa and James when he said that. Another employee who was kept anonymous and had a fake name throughout their interview stated, quote, "I don't think Lisa and James have a lot of business acumen. I don't think they ever did. I think Lisa's parents funded the start of her company. She's an artist, not a business person," end quote. A lot of former employees thought the demise of Lisa Frank Incorporated had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the personal drama and nonsense that went on behind the scenes. That proved to haunt Lisa for quite some time when it came to lawsuits. Which is where we are going to end part 1 because we will pick up with the lawsuits in part 2. I know that Lisa was no angel judging by former employees and what they had to say about her, but I do, in a sense, kind of feel bad for her. And again, I know that this was a team effort between Lisa and James and then the third wheel who was Rhonda eventually. But I do kind of feel bad for her because Lisa wanted to step back from the company to take care of her children. And in my opinion, James and Rhonda kind of ran Lisa Frank Incorporated into the ground. Now, that's not an excuse for Lisa. I'm not trying to place her as a victim in all of this. And I'm not trying to say that she didn't do anything wrong. But in my opinion, it seems like she just wanted to be an artist. She's not meant to do the business side of things, and James was supposed to do the business side of things, but he did a terrible job at it. But Lisa is also to blame for how her employees were treated, because if that conversation that happened with that one former employee where she said that she wasn't a very good, that Lisa said herself that she wasn't a good employer, if that conversation did happen, she was aware of what was going on. She was also aware of what was going on because her and James had issues while they were at the office. This creates a toxic work environment, and so she is to blame for that. So that is all that I have for part 1 of this series. Part 2 will hopefully be coming out soon. I'm hoping, But for all of you who were here last year for my Spooktober true crime series, I am doing that again this year. I have a few things planned out. I'm hoping that I can get everything done and filmed because, as you guys know, I am due in the month of October, towards the end of October. So I'm hoping that I can get everything kind of out because I am still physically working at our business. I'm not home yet, but we did, in case you guys didn't notice, we did move me into our bedroom. So I have my own little office set up here. The YouTube room that we just started in January and never finished actually was or is now being turned into the nursery. So that is why I'm here in our bedroom until we can find another spot for me. I know that I've had, when I have filmed in my bedroom before a few times, and I know that this is like housekeeping stuff that has nothing to do with the video, but I figured I would add this at the end in case anyone was wondering. I've had people say that the bathroom, they don't like it that the door's open, but I'm really sorry. You guys are going to have to deal with that because there's no door. This house was built in the 80s, and I guess in the 80s here in Florida, that was like a thing. I don't know if it was a trend or what it was, but so there's no door. It's just, that's a hole in the wall pretty much for the walkway, and there's nothing there. So if it does bother you guys too much, maybe I'll come up with an idea for curtains or something, but I'd really prefer to not drill holes in the wall because we don't plan on staying here for that much longer, crossing our fingers, at least another year, and we just don't want to have to redo all of that because we are renting this house and we are looking into buying our first home. So I'd rather not put holes in the wall if we don't have to. So I'm hoping that you guys can just kind of deal with that. But anyway, I think I got all of the housekeeping stuff out of the way. And yeah, so you guys let me know what you thought of this video so far. Part 2 will be coming out soon. Hopefully next week. I'm hoping because I have to finish part 2, and then I also have to start doing my Spooktober series. So it's going to be a little hectic in the month of October, plus having the baby coming and everything. So, okay, I've rambled. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. This is Monica reporting to you live from a highway. Bye! The craze of Lisa Frank has come and gone, with the company hitting its peak in the 1990s. However, as I went over in part 1 of this series, it wasn't always rainbows and unicorns as Lisa Frank perceived. After Lisa Frank decided to take her company back from her now ex-husband, James Green, and his sidekick, Rhonda Rowlett, who was the VP at the time, it started a litigious war. After all was said and done, there were a lot of pieces to pick up. There were plenty of scandals, and Lisa Frank being accused of scamming people and even stealing another artist's work. Today, we will dive into the lawsuits, scandals, alleged scams, alleged art theft, and more. This is part 2 of the rise and fall of Lisa Frank. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, hi, my name is Monica. I like to post anti-MLMs, that's anti-multi-level marketing, anti-unethical business practices. I guess we can kind of start adding that into my intro, along with some true crime content here on this channel. So if any of that interests you, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I would love for you to stick around. In today's video, I am bringing you part 2 of my Lisa Frank series. So with all that being said, just as a disclaimer, this video is for entertainment purposes only and just my opinions, along with just based on the research that I was able to do, the information that is readily available online and everything like that. But I do always encourage everyone to do their own research. In part 1, we went over the beginnings of Lisa Frank along with the work environment at Lisa Frank Incorporated, and also the, I guess you could say, kind of demise of the brand, because it didn't really run the business into the ground, but Lisa Frank has not hit the same peak that it has since the 1990s. In part 2, we're going to go over lawsuits, alleged scams, collabs, alleged art theft, and if Lisa Frank was the reason that an influencer slash designer, I'm going to kind of reference this person as both of those because I do think that Studio Mookie is both of those. But did Studio Mookie actually get evicted from her apartment because of Lisa Frank? That is something we're going to dive into today as well. Hey guys, Editing Monica here. So I just wanted to stop and say, for whatever reason in the video, I kept saying Studio Mookie. It's actually Studio Moochie, and I knew that, but I don't know why I was mispronouncing it in this entire video. So whenever I say Studio Mookie, I actually mean Studio Moochie. Now let's get back to the video. There were quite a number of lawsuits against Lisa Frank, and I'll list a few of them now, but I'll also go over a few throughout the video. If you remember where we left off in part 1, Lisa Frank and her now ex-husband James Green had a messy battle after Lisa won back her title as CEO of her own company. However, the litigious war that followed with her ex-husband was probably somewhat expected, but draining. The following lawsuits that I'm going to mention all came from the Jezebel article that I referenced a lot in part 1. Lisa Frank versus James Green, September 2005. Lisa's initial suit against James was to get rid of him from the company, and this did go through a bunch of appeals as well. James Green versus Lisa Frank, September 2005. Then, James decided he was going to counterclaim. James was trying to block a 1995 buy-sell agreement that gave Lisa the right to buy out James's shares in Lisa Frank Incorporated should the couple ever divorce. I mean, I think that's pretty straightforward if you ask me, but I'm not a lawyer. However, he claimed that he created 400 original characters and themes with the exception of a handful. He also tried to petition to dissolve Lisa Frank Incorporated. This was because he believed the way that Lisa was trying to take her company back was illegal. James wasn't successful with this petition, but it would take them 5 years to settle. Rhonda Rowlett versus Lisa Frank Incorporated, March 2006. Yes, even James's alleged side chick, Rhonda Rowlett, sued Lisa Frank Incorporated as well. She sued for $2 million plus damages because she claimed that she was often promised a severance should she retire or be fired by both Lisa and James. This went on for over 3 years before there was a sealed settlement. I know it's sealed, but I'd be so curious to know what they settled on, because you can't just say that you were promised a severance. There has to be some kind of documentation showing this. Lisa Frank Incorporated versus James Green and Jerry Rowlett, April 2006. This was a third-party counterclaim. Lisa Frank Incorporated alleged that Rhonda and James, along with Rhonda's husband Jerry Rowlett, stole 5 truckloads of company property and converted corporate funds for their personal use. There were also a bunch of other claims that were anywhere from James and Rhonda ruining a relationship with Wells Fargo that resulted in interest charges. Then there was Rhonda allegedly not paying the insurance premium for Lisa Frank Incorporated, and this resulted in the plan's cancellation in September of 2005. Then again in 2005, Rowlett failed to transmit 401k funds withheld from employee paychecks to the plan administrator, resulting in penalties to Lisa Frank Incorporated and jeopardizing the tax-exempt status of the plan for Lisa Frank Incorporated and its employees. The list keeps going on and on about the things that were allegedly done wrong. James Green versus Lisa Frank and Lisa Frank Incorporated, August of 2006. This was James trying to get $16.7 million to repay a loan for a private jet he bought. I mean, if he bought it, how is that the responsibility of Lisa Frank or Lisa Frank Incorporated? James Green versus Lisa Frank and Lisa Frank Incorporated, March 2008. James once sued for $2.2 million, which he claimed was his share of the sale for the jet. Rich people problems, geez. Green Bean Investments LLC versus Lisa Frank Incorporated, March 2008. James sued yet again and tried to take back Lisa Frank headquarters. He stated this was because Lisa Frank Incorporated had violated its lease with Green Bean Investments, which owned the property, and guess who happened to own 47.5% of Green Bean at the time? If you guessed James, then you were correct. Due to him owning this percentage of the company, he stated that it entitled him to re-enter and take possession of the property for Lisa Frank Incorporated. However, guess who also owned 47.5% of Green Bean? Lisa Frank herself. And the remaining 5% was owned by their two children, Hunter and Forrest, who were minors at the time. So with that being said, the lawsuit was dismissed. Jerry Rowlett versus Lisa Frank Incorporated, November 2008. Remember when I talked about that third-party counterclaim where the Rowletts and James were accused of stealing company property for their own personal use? Well, Jerry, Rhonda's husband, sued Lisa Frank Incorporated for punitive damages in regards to the allegations that he stole this company property. That suit was dismissed. James Green versus Lisa Frank Incorporated, October 2009. I swear, James makes me want to choose violence because he once again sued Lisa Frank Incorporated as a member of Green Bean Investments. This was him trying to have Lisa Frank Incorporated evicted from its headquarters. As part of the lawsuit, James had asked his sons, who were 13 and 9 years old at the time, and owned 5% of the company, to give him consent to take action against Lisa Frank Incorporated. Thankfully, the two children did not provide that consent, and James was unsuccessful with the eviction. What kind of despicable person does it take to use your own children to take down your ex-wife's company? I just cannot imagine my husband trying to get our future child to give him consent to kick me out of my own headquarters. I don't know how petty Lisa was, so maybe all of this was warranted in a way, but using your children is just disgusting. I understand they were involved because they owned 5% of the company, but seriously, this really pissed me off. Getting your children involved in your messy divorce is the scummiest of the scum. In addition to all of these lawsuits, both Lisa and James spent so many years bickering and fighting in the legal system over things as minuscule as things like family photographs. Just make copies of those photographs, for crying out loud. It's really not that hard. As stated in part 1, Lisa did have to downsize and she had to let go of a lot of her employees. In 2010, she had a licensing agreement with CSS Industries, a Delaware-based company. This agreement stated that CSS would manufacture and sell her products, but in 2012, Lisa filed a lawsuit against CSS because they failed to earn her the $2.8 million in royalties that they had promised. Something I forgot to mention in part 1 was about good old Jamesy boy. Apparently, he found Jesus. He was Jewish and converted to Christianity. James ended up selling religious merch. One of his shirts is actually $95 at the time of filming this. That's more than Brittany Dawn's merch. I didn't think it was possible to charge and most likely make more money than scammer Brittany Dawn off of religious merch. If you don't know much about Brittany Dawn, I've made 3 videos on her, which I'll leave linked below. I'm really sorry. I just hate when people use religion as a way to scam people, in my opinion. His website is jameschristianman.com, and it's still up and running. James's website also has his poetry, photography, and sculptures on it. A former employee named Justin said, quote, James did not seem like he gave a fuck about God or anything like that. There was that South Park episode with Faith where Cartman started a Christian boy band just to take advantage of people. That's kind of what James's new business feels like, end quote. I'm not saying that someone can't find Jesus or mocking anyone who has been through some terrible times, whether that be their own doing or not, to in turn be able to make it out alive and find Jesus. I do believe people can change, but with people like James and Brittany Dawn, I'm going to side-eye and question their motives just a little bit, especially if they're selling merch off of it and retreats like Brittany does. Anyway, James started Salvation LLC just a few short months after leaving Lisa Frank Incorporated. It might come as no surprise that Rhonda Rowlett became his VP. I can't help but question the motives of this company that James started so shortly after leaving Lisa Frank Incorporated. They clearly didn't have the same kind of success as Lisa Frank Incorporated. I mean, have any of you heard of it? Because I haven't, but I also don't practice Christianity, so maybe that might be why that I'm just not in that sphere, I guess you can say. Like I said earlier, I do think it's possible for people to change, and maybe James did find Jesus. The next topic I wanted to discuss was a situation with Studio Mookie, or otherwise known as Amina Mucholo, and Tassel Fairy here on YouTube. Lisa Frank did get called out by plenty of people. However, there was a video by Petty Page that gives a different perspective that I found interesting as well. I'll leave that video linked below because it's definitely an unpopular opinion, but I do think that we have to look at everything from different sides, and unpopular opinions are part of that. There were some things I did agree with Paige on and some that I didn't. I'll go over my opinions too. But before I get ahead of myself, let's talk about what happened with Amina or Studio Muki. I'll probably use those names interchangeably, but just know that they're the same person. Brands such as IKEA and Urban Outfitters have partnered with Studio Muki on products, collaborations, and campaigns since launching Studio Muki in 2011. Anyway, Amina was renting an apartment that she called Cloudland. She lived in this downtown LA apartment with her significant other, Salvatore, and their 2 dogs, Worf and Princess Leia. Her apartment did go viral once she started sharing photos of it, and while it's not how I would style my own place, I can appreciate the design, art, hard work, and I'm sure hours among hours that went into creating this space. I think she did a beautiful job with it, and it truly is a work of art, or was. One criticism I would have so far with this, though, is when you are renting, it's not your place, and unfortunately, depending on laws in your state, you can be evicted or a lease can be terminated. For example, my husband and I are currently renting, and we purposely have not done too much with the house besides little things like painting the walls because they were hideous when we moved in. But we have kept holes in the walls to a minimum. I've gotten really accustomed to using those command strips. But sadly, Studio Muki didn't own this apartment, so when her landlord said they were evicting her and her family, of course, this would be devastating to anyone because no one wants to get evicted. What was weird was this eviction had come out of nowhere, it felt like. Quickly, Amina found out that there was going to be a Lisa Frank pop-up collab with Hotels.com across the street, and it just so happens that the person who owned that building also owned her building, which is when Amina claimed that her eviction was due to the Lisa Frank pop-up. But why would that even happen? If you look at photos of her apartment and Lisa Frank's apartment side by side, the similarities in design are uncanny. There were a series of videos that Amina put on her YouTube, and in the one she did talk about how they've paid late multiple times in the past, but it was almost like an unwritten agreement with their landlord, and their landlord didn't have an issue with this until Lisa Frank and the Hotels.com collab was happening in 2019. Allegedly, they used this as their way of evicting Amina and her family. The landlord told Amina that they needed to be out by August, right before the pop-up collab was supposed to happen, and the landlord refused to take her rent money. I haven't looked into the laws in that area, but if anyone knows, is that even legal for a landlord to refuse to take rent money? I'm sure depending on the lease agreement, there might be loopholes or maybe it is legal. But before we get into all of that and the aftermath, let's start from the beginning. That wasn't the first time Lisa Frank had heard of Studio Muki, which is why there are suspicions that Lisa Frank did steal Studio Muki's design. According to this HouseBeautiful.com article, Lisa Frank had actually had one-on-one correspondence and even shared Amina's photo on their social media. As you can see here, here is a series of DMs between Lisa Frank and Studio Muki, along with this post on their Facebook that says, Studio Muki has the right idea. Let's sleep in today in our hashtag Lisa Frank gear. When Amina was interviewed and asked if she had heard about the Jezebel article that came out, and I've referenced a lot in this series, her response was, quote, I hadn't heard any of that negative stuff. I was just so flattered. I thought it was so cool that, she likes my work. It was something that felt very validating, end quote. If you take one look at Studio Muki's Instagram, it's clear that of course she would love Lisa Frank because of all the bright colors, rainbows, and just pure magic in her aesthetically pleasing feed. And I've fangirled before, I think a lot of us have, so I can definitely understand where she was coming from with that. Even though I wasn't as into Lisa Frank when I was younger as other people were, I would fangirl if Lisa Frank reached out to me via DMs or replied to an Insta story. That's awesome AF. If you remember from part 1, I did talk about how Lisa Frank would purchase art pieces from indigenous communities and then sell them at a marked up price. So is this a pattern? I'm not saying Lisa Frank isn't talented or that she isn't original. I just can't help but wonder if she did in fact steal the design for the Lisa Frank pop-up hotel from Amina after seeing it online. Studio Muki was known for Cloudland, and Cloudland even had its own Instagram. Something that Amina posted about during Blackout Tuesday in 2020 was this. I decided to call the hashtag Lisa Frank brand out about their performative allyship on Instagram. Remember when Lisa Frank totally ripped me off and stole my apartment design that was the source of my income for a hotel in my very same building, and then conspired with the two other corporations involved to silence me and have me thrown out on the street? Now they're on Instagram lying, LOL. Stop with the performative allyship. These brands will steal from Black creatives, mistreat and discriminate against our Black employees if they even have any, and then they show up to post a hashtag as if they actually give one single F. We don't need your empty gestures, we need your action. Hire Black people, donate to one of the many causes that need funding right now, use your massive platforms to speak up about racial injustices and amplify Black voices in a meaningful way. And to at Lisa Frank specifically, if you really want to show us that hashtag Black Lives Matter to you, start by paying me for my work that you stole and profited from and all of the loss of income that followed because of it. Otherwise, shut the F up and stop trying to capitalize on Black suffering to stay relevant and appease your guilt. Put your money where your mouth is, Lisa, or stop talking. I would say that's pretty powerful, but then on Instagram, Lisa Frank Incorporated decided that it was a good idea to post the following, I'm assuming in response to Amina, and because of this, their massive audience then decided to gaslight and attack Amina. To our fans, as all of you are, we are heartbroken over recent events and the level of racial injustice in this country. Out of respect for the importance of yesterday, we chose not to respond to an issue that arose on our page. While all of the country was spending time reflecting, learning, listening, and taking action during Blackout Tuesday, we were disappointed to hear an opportunistic individual taking that moment to focus attention on herself for her own personal benefit by repeating her false accusations that we have stolen artwork and designs from her. Over the past months, we have silently forgiven her need to deflect blame away from her own failures by perpetuating this false narrative. However, we owe it to our fans to speak out this one time to address these lies. During the fall of 2019, we participated in a 2-week hotel room pop-up. We did not design the hotel room or choose its location, but simply provided our artwork. Art that is completely original and dates back as far as the early 1980s. Additionally, the Lisa Frank pop-up was in an entirely different building than where the eviction incident is alleged to have taken place. We had absolutely nothing to do with why her landlord evicted her from her apartment. We have never stolen designs. We take immense pride in our original artwork and creations that have brought our fans joy for decades. We adore our fans, and the goal when the company began remains the same today, to bring color, happiness, and imagination to the world. We sincerely hope that this brief distraction in no way will draw attention away from the very real stories and critical events happening in the world and the most crucial issues that our society faces today. Please support and love one another during this difficult time. Do I think that Amina and her family were evicted from their apartment because of the Lisa Frank pop-up? That I don't know, because I've only heard Amina's side. I haven't heard the landlord's side of the story. Maybe there were issues, or maybe that unwritten agreement about them being able to pay rent late was never put in place, but I am leaning more towards Amina's side, especially after reading Lisa Frank's horrible response on Instagram. The gaslighting in that was just, I don't even have words. At the same time, though, with the buildings being owned by the same person, that raises the question of, was this just a way to be able to profit off of Cloudland, since they would have so much traffic coming to the Lisa Frank pop-up? They could have rented it out as an Airbnb or even used it as a place for influencers to come and take photos. You can't deny that Cloudland is an influencer's dream photo spot if you're into that aesthetic. Amina did go to court and she had a GoFundMe set up. She eventually moved out of the apartment, and according to an Instagram post, she did paint the walls back to white so that the landlord couldn't monetize off of it, if that was in fact what they were planning on doing. I would have done the same thing. I've seen comments from when this was all happening, and some people were saying that Amina should be petty by painting the walls either white or black, because black would be a really hard color to paint over, and they shouldn't be able to monetize off of her work. I'm glad that she did paint the walls back white, because I agree, if they were looking to monetize off of her creation, and that's the only reason why they evicted her, then screw them. When Amina was interviewed about this situation, she said, quote, "It's just so frustrating to see something from your own imagination. Maybe people don't recognize every detail, but to see things from your own mind interpreted and covered with corporate branding is just so sad. It's all surreal. I can't really believe this is happening," end quote. However, this wasn't the only time that a brand would allegedly copy Amina. I know that this video is supposed to be strictly about Lisa Frank, so I'll keep this one brief, but I did want to bring attention to this just because of how unethical this company was towards Amina. Back in summer of 2020, Amina called out MGA Entertainment over an LOL surprise doll. Amina found out about the doll that was called the Rainbow Raver once it came out in stores in July of 2019 after her fans sent her photos of it because they thought it was a collab that was done with her. When interviewed, Amina said, quote, "The first few times I saw it, I was kind of in shock. The first thing I noticed was the exact replica of a hairstyle I did to celebrate my 35th birthday. It was aqua with rainbow highlights, and it was shocking because the hairstyle was the result of my imagination and leftover hair I had from a previous style I wore. I didn't have a visual reference or anything, so it was disturbing to see something that came straight from my mind to be duplicated on a toy that I had no part in creating. Once I was done reeling from the hair, I noticed all of the other similarities," end quote. Even with what happened with Lisa Frank, Amina decided to keep quiet about this for almost a year, until another MGA Entertainment doll brand, Bratz, posted something on social media about the Black Lives Matter movement. This is what Amina had to say about the LOL surprise doll. Quote, "This sort of thing happens to Black creatives more than you could possibly imagine, and we are tired. LOL surprise, you are not special or inclusive simply because you are keen to make money off of Black children and their families. If you really champion inclusivity and actually care about Black people, prove it by making this right," end quote. The CEO of MGA Entertainment, Isaac Larian, responded to Amina on Twitter. Isaac dirty deleted these tweets, but this is what he had to say. "You are a disgrace to Black people and the Black Lives Matter cause, liar and coward. You are a liar and an extortionist and fraud. Who's your so-called lawyer? Put his name and contact information here publicly now so we can contact him or her. Now we will no longer be nice and we will sue you for defamation, extortion, fraud, etc. Watch." After these tweets, Isaac Larian did attempt to backpedal by saying that he wrote these tweets out of frustration and that he didn't know Amina personally, but I'm sorry, for a CEO to respond with that kind of hostility and not taking a moment to really look into what's going on is so unprofessional. MGA Entertainment ended up tweeting this to show their timeline of the Rainbow Raver doll. I guess they thought this was their proof that they didn't copy her, but Amina stated she never received any kind of hard evidence showing the dates that they put in that graphic. Whether or not this doll was a straight-up copy of Amina, the CEO's public tweets were absolutely disgusting and uncalled for. I'd be curious to know your thoughts on both of these situations if you have any, so leave them in the comment section below. Now we're going to move on to the Glamour Girls Kickstarter situation with Lisa Frank. Jen from Jen Love, or formerly known as Jen Love's Reviews, even shared her 2 cents in a video when she found out about the Lisa Frank and Orly collab recently.
I get that little twinge of, you still owe me money. If you did not know the backstory, just very quickly, Lisa Frank collabed with a company called Glamour Dolls many years ago. A lot of us supported on the Kickstarter and never saw anything. They ended up selling the stuff on Hot Topic and people were getting it in Ipsy bags, but the people that actually backed the production of the collab got nothing in the mail. I think some of the highest backers may have gotten like a brush or a bronzer or a single shadow. But we were supposed to get like Trapper Keeper eyeshadow palettes and all kinds of cool stuff. I contributed $70, never got anything, tried to reach out to Kickstarter, and they were like, well, you know, it's our policy is you're using it at your own risk, and if you didn't get what you paid for, then that's on the brand. So yeah, Lisa Frank collabed with Morphe a little while ago, and now Lisa Frank is collabing with Orly Nail Polish.
There are plenty of testimonials out there about people who are still upset about this Kickstarter, rightfully so. I'm also only going to briefly go over what happened, but a channel here on YouTube, Truth Sleuth, did a full 2-part series about this. So if you're looking for the nitty-gritty information, I highly recommend watching those videos. I'll leave them linked below. So what exactly happened? Back in February of 2017, an indie brand out of Montclair, New Jersey, which is not far from where I lived actually, announced a Kickstarter campaign with Lisa Frank Incorporated. The funding period was from February 16, 2017 to April 2nd, 2017. This Kickstarter made $370,000 with 5,935 backers. Each tier of the Kickstarter was obviously a different price, but each one had different products you would receive. The campaign was set to be finished by September 2017, and by this date, the backers weren't given what they were promised. By fall of 2017, some people who weren't backers of the Kickstarter received a bronzer or a brush in their Ipsy bags, which is odd because you would think that the people who backed the Kickstarter would be the first in line to get part of this collab. Well, come October, after backers still hadn't received anything they were promised, but all of a sudden, some of the products from their collab were showing up at Hot Topic. People who pledged $5 were promised a digital background, but Glamour Dolls changed their minds and said that these backers would receive an autographed vintage Lisa Frank postcard. However, after a lot of people shared their photos, it wasn't a vintage postcard, nor was it actually autographed. It was just a photocopy of an autograph. The last update for the Kickstarter is from April of 2020. People are still commenting on it, asking for refunds at the time of filming this. In 2019, Lisa Frank Incorporated issued this press release. To our Lisa Frank fans, in June 2016, Lisa Frank Incorporated granted a license to Glamour Dolls to allow them to put Lisa Frank Incorporated's artwork on a line of cosmetic products developed and manufactured by Glamour Dolls. Lisa Frank Incorporated has no financial interest other than the licensing of art to Glamour Dolls for its line of cosmetics. Glamour Dolls advised Lisa Frank Incorporated that it planned to launch a Kickstarter campaign to advance its public relations and would offer the Kickstarter community a special line of limited edition cosmetics. Lisa Frank Incorporated's involvement was limited to artwork, and it has no direct involvement in the production or distribution of any products made by Glamour Dolls. Lisa Frank Incorporated learned that the backers of the Kickstarter campaign were complaining that they had not received the promised products from Glamour Dolls as identified on the Glamour Dolls Kickstarter website. Lisa Frank Incorporated has worked hard over many years to build a brand that not only stands for quality and excellence, but that recognizes its devoted and wonderful fans. Our licenses are vetted to justice to our brand and respect to our fans. It therefore saddens us deeply that so many of our fans have been disappointed and not received product from Glamour Dolls. Lisa Frank Incorporated has urged Glamour Dolls for several months to step up and offer a solution to the Kickstarter backers and supports a timely resolution of this issue. Lisa Frank Incorporated will continue to stand behind our fans until this is resolved and is hopeful that Glamour Dolls will cooperate to achieve that goal. Well, in June of this year, 2021, Insider published an article talking about Glamour Dolls suing Lisa Frank. Glamour Dolls is suing for fraud, defamation, breach of contract, and more. In this complaint that was filed by their attorneys on May 27, 2021, they state that Lisa Frank Incorporated failed to deliver its side of the licensing agreement that the companies agreed on in 2016, and that Lisa Frank shared lies about the situation with the press. Glamour Dolls is claiming that they paid Lisa Frank Incorporated approximately $770,000 to date, but most people still have yet to receive their orders because Lisa Frank Incorporated, quote, intentionally and blatantly stymied the process at every possible juncture, end quote. This was due to Lisa Frank Incorporated allegedly refusing to provide artwork and timely approvals and disapproving sample products. Glamour Dolls stated that they were also forced to pay Lisa Frank Incorporated royalties early on, even though the company had not even made the money in order to pay these royalties, and they are claiming this is so that Lisa Frank could cancel its contract with the brand. Peter Georgodis, the co-founder of Glamour Dolls, said to Insider, quote, as the case moves forward and information is disclosed, backers and customers will get more of a complete picture of the circumstances around the Glamour Dolls collaboration with Lisa Frank. Ultimately, we believe justice will be served and are excited to refocus on our mission of creating fun, vegan, cruelty-free products and experiences for customers all around the world, end quote. In November of 2020, there was a statement made by Lisa Frank Incorporated to Insider that said, quote, After many months of pushing Glamour Dolls to live up to its contractual obligations and deliver products to our fans and retailers that ordered products, Lisa Frank Incorporated reached the point of exasperation, terminated the agreement with Glamour Dolls, and contacted the federal government. To say we are disappointed by the events that transpired as a result of this license is an understatement, end quote. In the lawsuit against Lisa Frank Incorporated, Glamour Dolls stated that the statement made by Lisa Frank Incorporated labeled the brand as corrupt, untrustworthy, and incompetent, in addition to causing the company injury to its business reputation. Glamour Dolls is now seeking compensation for direct harm, punitive damages, and disgorgement of defendants' profits. It seems to me like there is a lot of back and forth and a lot of he said, she said type nonsense going on. These two companies have been bickering back and forth about this situation, and a lot of excuses have been made. I don't think that it reflects well on Glamour Dolls that there was a lack of updates, especially since people are still commenting on the Kickstarter, but their last update was in April of 2020. Since things are going to court, I'm sure certain things have to be kept confidential, but their attorneys should be able to help them with a statement. I'm not sure who I would side with here because we really don't know both sides. Each side, in my opinion, is hiding the truth and only trying to place the blame on each other. We only know bits and pieces, and certain things will probably be kept confidential in court, and who knows, maybe the settlement will be one of those types where it's a sealed settlement. With all of the back and forth, I think both companies are responsible for this. It seems like the behind the scenes was a mess, and both companies should have just put whatever their issues with one another were aside and figured out a way to address and provide what was promised to the customers who backed this Kickstarter. I just hope that the victims of this scam are compensated. As a tip for anyone who ever deals with this kind of thing, always report these types of things to the FTC and your state attorney general. It's a lot easier to report than you think, and once you have enough people reporting, it sets off alarm bells. I recently made a video about a reality TV couple who scammed so many people with their pyramid scheme, and it was due to them reporting this pyramid scheme to their state attorney general and the FTC that this couple is now being sued and being taken to court for this. I wanted to move on to talk about other collabs that Lisa Frank has had with brands over the years. These aren't as scandalous, I guess we can say, as what I've already spoken about, but I think it's worth mentioning since it seems like Lisa Frank Incorporated did try and make a comeback. As I spoke about in part 1, 90s nostalgia has become such a great marketing tactic for companies. I've fallen for it. I'm the one who went out and bought Reptar bars even though they weren't that tasty, and I bought myself a Tamagotchi recently. Lisa Frank could have easily made a massive comeback with the 90s nostalgia trend. In my opinion, I do think the company tried because they did have some well-known collabs. The only difference is the timing of some of these collabs. For example, the Morphe and Orly one happened after the Kickstarter situation. Back in 2012, Urban Outfitters and Lisa Frank announced a collab to bring back some of that Lisa Frank a lot of us remember. Urban Outfitters was even able to interview Lisa Frank herself, although under one condition that her face be covered. I went over that interview a little bit in part 1. Urban Outfitters and Lisa Frank decided to bring back some of the vintage designs. This collab was all limited edition, and it varied from stationery to stickers, cookie jars, erasers, and some clothing. The stationery, stickers, and other school supplies, if you will, were actually decently priced for vintage items. In 2013, I guess some of the customers were not happy with the t-shirts line, style, and sizing, so they released this statement on Facebook. After reading through some of the comments underneath this post, it seems like the clothing line was catered to Urban Outfitters customers and their styling was very limited. There was another comment by someone who said, quote, "My concern with Urban Outfitters is their history of stealing designs from independent artists and using them without crediting or compensating the artist. I know they are a large company that can give you a certain amount of exposure, but watch out for them. I know Lisa Frank started small, and I know she would have been upset if a company like Urban Outfitters ripped off her designs when she was just getting started," end quote. Which is a valid concern given all of the other scandals associated with Lisa Frank, but I would beg to differ because Lisa Frank did grow up pretty wealthy, and one can argue that Lisa has done this to others. If you remember from part 1, while we don't know the whole story, did she rip off the indigenous communities who she bought art from, then marked it up and resold it? We don't know if there was a contract, and if there was a contract with those communities, if it was an ethical one. Another collab was the one Lisa Frank did with Reebok back in 2017. I'm not going to lie, I didn't know about this collab, but it's probably because they didn't actually sell them. From what I read, they made 2 pairs and then did a giveaway. In a press release, Lisa Frank said, quote, "I've always been a sneaker girl, and I'm forever on the lookout for fun new styles. Sometimes I even make up my own sneakers, adding height to a flat pair of lace-ups. I used to paint my sneakers and everybody loved them," end quote. I'm sure whoever ended up with these sneakers was super excited. I am curious as to why they only made 2 pairs and did this as a giveaway though. Was it to create FOMO? And if you don't know what that means, it means fear of missing out. I feel like it kind of was, and to also at the same time create hype around both of the brands. But in my opinion, I really think they would have done well with a line of shoes, even if it were a limited run of shoes. They probably would have sold out really fast and both brands would have made money and created a lot of hype around it. Especially because we are in an age of social media and influencers where it could have been done really well. I mean, even Crocs were able to make a comeback. A collab that did sell on shelves was at Target. This also came out in 2017. You were able to buy pajamas for regular Target prices, and you can still purchase Lisa Frank notebooks and the Morphe collab with Lisa Frank on the Target website. Lisa Frank seems to have been busy with collabs in 2017 because this was also the time of the Kickstarter campaign. So I'm starting to wonder if they just took on too much work all at one time, and because Glamour Dolls was an indie brand, not a big name brand like Reebok or Target, that the collab fell through the cracks. I'm sure we will learn more if the lawsuit between Glamour Dolls and Lisa Frank Incorporated is going to be available to the public to know about. In November of 2020, Morphe announced that it was collabing with Lisa Frank. This was to be released online in Morphe stores and other retailers. The collab included rainbow sponges, cheetah print brushes, and a Lisa Frank version of Morphe's 35B palette, which was discontinued in 2018. In April of this year, 2021, the collection was relaunched and it included 2 new products, which were lip crayon trios. Of course, some people were really excited about the collab, while others brought up that they still have not received refunds from the failed Kickstarter. I think that the failed Kickstarter will be brought up for a while with any Lisa Frank collabs because people still haven't received refunds. Not to mention, a lot of people also have their own opinions about Morphe as a company as well. The final collab we'll be going over is the Orly collab. This was announced in August of this year, 2021. Of course, the same thing that happened with Morphe happened with Orly. Some people were excited, others brought up the Kickstarter, and rightfully so. I mean, if I was scammed out of money, I'd be upset to see new collabs coming out too. With the Orly collab, it's exclusively being sold at Ulta, and they have nail polish along with nail decals. In my opinion, I actually think that the nail decals are super cute. I don't know if I'll support Lisa Frank in any collabs after learning all of this, but I do love the nostalgia aspect of it. And Lisa Frank was part of my childhood, and I'm not going to sit here and say that my childhood is ruined after researching for this series, because at the time it was bright, fun colors that sparked my imagination. But even though a small channel like myself doesn't matter to the Lisa Frank brand, and it's not like I have much of a reach, I am a little disappointed. None of us are perfect, and we all have to make mistakes to be able to learn and grow from them. But some of these mistakes, I mean, they were pretty major mistakes. Like, they were pretty extreme. So that is the end of today's video, and that is the end of my Lisa Frank series. Part 1 will be linked in the description box below, along with all of my sources and anything, other videos that I spoke about in this video. So that will all be linked below. And like I said, if you're looking for more thorough deep dives into some of the things that I spoke about, there's videos that Truth Sleuth made along with Kalita Rosita and of course Petty Page, who gave her unpopular opinion about the eviction that happened. So I will leave all of that linked below. If you guys want some more Lisa Frank content, highly recommend checking out all of the videos that I will leave linked below. And yeah, so you guys let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys next time. This is Monica reporting to you live from a highway. Bye!